Okay. Good evening, everybody. Today is Wednesday, February 2nd. This is the Scarborough Town Council regular, least scheduled meeting. I'll call this meeting to order. I'll start with Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Jody, would you help us with the roll call?
Counselor Seither,
Here.
Counselor Anderson,
Here.
Counselor Paul Johnson,
Here.
Counselor Katarina,
Here.
Counselor Hamel,
Here.
Counselor Ken Johnson,
Here.
and Chairman Clucci.
Here.
All present. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is general public comments. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak to something that is not on our agenda this evening? I'm seeing that we do have somebody here. If you come up and just state your name and address,
Can I take my mask off?
you can.
Hi, my name is Shelley Pelletier. I'm from 10 Snow Canning Road in Scarborough. I am a state and locally licensed medical marijuana caregiver operating at 10 Snow Canning Road in Scarborough since 2015. I write to ask that the council consider adding a medical marijuana dispensary license category to the town's marijuana ordinance. In 2019, when the ordinance committee undertook the difficult task of developing and enacting new ordinances to license and regulate marijuana businesses, it was clear that the town wanted to license and regulate marijuana cultivation and manufacturing, but that adult use retail and caregiver retail would not be authorized in Scarborough. Those councilors who were members of the ordinance committee back in 2019 may remember, however, that the original version of the town's marijuana licensing ordinance included the dispensary category. You will still see references to dispensary in the ordinance definitions in place today. The dispensary license category was removed based on concern voiced in public comment from the Scarborough caregiver community that to allow dispensaries at a time when dispensary licenses were limited to 8 at the state level would roll out the red carpet for large multi-state operators to dominate medical marijuana in Scarborough while preventing small local caregivers from participating in a retail market. In January of 2021, the state law cap on dispensary licenses was removed. The Office of Marijuana Policy is now authorized to issue an unlimited number of dispensary licenses. The state license fee has been reduced from $12,500 to $5,000 to make the licenses more accessible. Furthermore, the Office of Marijuana Policy is encouraging caregivers whose businesses have outgrown the traditional caregiver model to pursue the newly available dispensary licenses. A dispensary license is an all-in-one license for medical cultivation, medical manufacturing, and medical retail. A licensee may cite their dispensary operations at up to 2 locations. For example, a licensee could have a dispensary retail storefront in one town and their cultivation and manufacturing in another town. There is no requirement that all 3 of these uses occur at the same location. What this means is that a town would have many options as to how to implement a dispensary license category. For example, a town could enact an ordinance that would only license dispensary cultivation and manufacturing, but still disallow dispensary retail storefronts. Why is this license category important to local caregivers? Caregivers operating under the traditional medical caregiver license are limited to 30 flowering plants or 500 square feet of flowering canopy, whereas adult use cultivators can cultivate up to 20,000 square feet of flowering canopy under one license. Scarborough caregivers would like the same opportunities as Scarborough adult use licensees to upsize their medical cultivation square footage. As with all new state law marijuana license categories, a state dispensary license requires towns to enact an ordinance allowing the license activity. Towns are also required to complete a local authorization form before the state will issue a dispensary license. If the dispensary license will be cited in 2 different locations in 2 different towns, both towns will be required to submit local authorization forms. I appreciate your time today, and I'm asking that the town council requests that the ordinance committee take up the issue of adding a dispensary license category in Scarborough. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pelletier. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak for general public comment? I'm seeing nobody else in person. Is there anybody online?
No.
Okay. Any members of council like to respond to Ms. Pelletier's comments? Ms. Councilor Johnson.
First, Shelley, I know you've been super cooperative during the last couple of years, so I appreciate. I know with Snow Canning Road, we've done a lot of work with that property in particular, and I think as far as my interaction with you indirectly with everything that we've dealt with, I feel like we've had a good relationship, so I appreciate it. I talked to Mr. Burke today, John Burke, an attorney for some caregivers about this very issue. I'm generally supportive of this. I don't think it's going to happen next month. I think that ordinance has a tremendous amount of work, but I personally think that we need to revisit some of our fees, and I think we need to finish, maybe perhaps let the state finish a little bit of its work, because I'm a little ignorant to what's happening at the state level. But generally speaking, this makes sense on its surface. So I just appreciate you bringing it up, because it's been 2 years since we did it, and I think we need to revisit it. It's brand new, and we said when we did it 2 years ago that we would revisit it, and perhaps it's time to revisit it when the state finishes a little bit more of their work. So.
Thank you.
I was just going to add to that, also from an ordinance committee perspective, we have seen that the laws have been changing and evolving, that, the reduction in fees, but also I understand the argument that you're making. And when we heard this, when we developed that ordinance over the past couple of years, there were many concerns about local operators being crowded out by big players from other places. So, we're attuned to this, and we appreciate this very articulate letter that you've given us, and I'm sure that we will get this in the queue in some fashion in ordinance.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll just add, it sounds like medical providers are at almost an unfair disadvantage relative to retail. But I know that there's a lot of things in motion at the state level as well. I think Councilor Katarina was talking that they may be even eliminating the distinction between the two. So I think we'll know more in a couple months what locally we might need to do or be able to do. But I can see what you're talking about. I appreciate you bringing it to our attention. Thank you for coming. Next up is item 5, approval of the minutes from our January 19th, 2022 town council meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Tony, would you call the roll?
Counselor Seider,
Yes.
Counselor Anderson,
Yes.
Counselor Paul Johnson,
Yes.
Counselor Katarina,
Yes.
Counselor Counselor
Yes.
Hamel,
Yes.
Counselor Ken Johnson, forgive me,
Yes.
and Chairman Clucci.
Yes, again. Sorry.
Thank you, that was unanimous.
Yes. Item 6 is adjustments to the agenda. Does anybody have any adjustments to the agenda? And seeing none, I signed the treasurer's warrants before this evening's meeting. And then item 8 is the town manager's report.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a couple of things to update the council and the public about. Just to make you aware, this is probably a topic that will be kind of years in the making, but most recently on Martin Luther King Day on January 17th, we had another event, winter weather event here in town that caused the closure of Route 1 across the marsh for better part of the afternoon, 3 or 4 hours. During my tenure here, that's probably happened 2 or 3 or maybe 4 times. And it's often attributed to kind of the perfect combination of events with high tides and winds and so on and so forth. But the fact is, and I think our comprehensive plan did a good job of recognizing the need to be looking forward for climate change and kind of resiliency, and particularly where, how our infrastructure stacks up. So it really caught my attention again, and finally I want to do something about it. So I've kind of started to engage my staff. We've reached out to DOT, who has been receptive to at least be part of the conversation to kick it off. And I've also reached out to GPCOG to maybe be a convener or kind of an intermediary to kind of pull parties together. There is some money at the state level through the governor's office that we would like to pursue to perhaps do some initial technical research. I think DOT itself has done some work. But frankly, there's been no comprehensive look at what the long-term fix is. That section of road, and this is a bit urban legend, but I think it's true. Essentially, the road base floats, and it's based on a series of log timbers that are kind of laid across that road. And historically, we've simply been adding pavement and weight to it. And so, not surprisingly, this system is not going to sustain us into the future. And frankly, the fix is, I think, quite complicated and very expensive. It's more than likely a causeway of sorts or something that's going to be a way to super elevate that roadway. And nor are there easy alternatives. The thought of using Payne Road as a workaround, just I can't conceive of that. So long story short, I just want to start the conversation. I think it's going to have to, we're going to have to be continually to push this this conversation and hopefully bring along our financial and other partners to make something happen. So again, it's going to be years in the making, but I think it needs to start somewhere. I'd also like to use certainly staff resources and leverage some of our committees. I think there's a couple of committees that might have different touch points on the issue with sustainability and certainly transportation. So we'll pull them in and find if there's ways to engage those folks as we go forward. So stay tuned. It'll be a long process, I suspect. Also wanted to update you, council may recall back in November, just last fall, I approached the council and you authorized me to join into some national class action opioid lawsuits that were underway. The state of Maine, through the Attorney General's office, was a party to these suits, along with many other states. And municipalities had an option to actually be a participant in the class action suit. So with the authorization, I did submit the town of Scarborough, and to my great surprise, just last week, we were notified that the suits have been settled, and in remarkable time, I think we got in at the 11th hour, rather than the front end, we got in just in time. And there's still details to be sorted out, but the long and short of it is there's $130 million, and Scarborough's take of that is 1.83% paid out over an 18-year period. So by my quick math, that's about $2.4 million. And the suit is very particular in terms of what the funds can be used for, but there's a fairly broad set of allocations. I believe the school district will also benefit in some way with the monetary component here as well. So stay tuned on that. I'll need to come and have the council actually formally accept those settlement funds. I just want to wait a bit so I know more details, but I want to make you aware that remarkably, that has turned around and been finalized, within 3 months of our involvement. So stay tuned. I think in the next month or two, I'll be back in front of you with some more details in that regard. Also want to mention just in passing, this is something on my mind as we set up for budget. You may recall we worked very hard over the last 3 or 4 years, particularly last year with the open collective bargaining agreements, to put all of our employees on a common index for cost of living increases. And that index is the employer cost index, particularly for local governments. So we think it's a very good indicator for local government wages. And they did every year annually, end of January, they issue the ECI each year. This year will be 2.7%. So depending on the exact language in our collective bargaining agreements, they have floors and ceilings, but we have some fixed numbers to actually build our budget from. I suspect there may be a bit of a lag. I suspect that doesn't strike me as comparing to some of the Social Security increases and such that are more kind of consumer cost related. And so there may be a lag, and we'll see maybe a higher one next year. We'll have to see. But anyway, it gives us some budget assurance and certainty that we can start building from. And pleased to have that. This time last year, we had 4 open collective bargaining agreements, not knowing quite where to start. So pleased to have that certainty. Just a couple of reminders. Project Grace is conducting its 10th annual fuel rally, Saturday, February 19th. It will happen right in the front parking lot here, Town Hall and Public Safety Building. Public safety, police and fire have always been a big part of that event. They have an ambitious goal. Last year, they raised $30,000 for local heat assistance. I think this year, the goal is for $25,000, and there's a match by Mr. Eddie Wooden to match it for another $25,000. So ambitious goal, again, February 19th, here in the front parking lot from 10 to 12. Lastly, just some housekeeping matters. We are going through a financial software upgrade, and we've successfully found some workarounds, so there'll be no interruption during our working hours. Folks can come in and do all their business. There will be a slight disruption with online payments for from February 13th, which is a Friday, 11th, which is a Friday through the 13th. And we'll have staff in over the weekend, seeing that migration to the new system and testing to make sure that 8 o'clock Monday morning, when we're open for business, we're in fact able to conduct business. So all of our initial tests appear that to be very successful. But again, there'll be a slight interruption. Excuse me. And lastly, we are starting to get booked up with workshops. So I want to make sure everyone has the next 4 or 5 weeks on your schedule. So next week, February 9th, there'll be a single item workshop. Again, that's an off meeting week, so make sure you put that on your calendars. This will be for a town center update. Perhaps the chairman can speak more to that, what to expect. At your next regular meeting on the 16th, we'll have a downtown TIF workshop. This is a matter that's been worked through the finance committee. They just yesterday had made a recommendation to move this forward and have laid out a kind of a timeline, including a workshop on the 16th. That's followed by March 2nd. Councilor Caterina will be leading a workshop to consider the recommended charter changes that your charter review committee proposed about a year ago, and decide which, if any, will go to the voters for approval consideration. And then finally, March 16th, we are scheduled to have a joint meeting with the Cape Elizabeth Town Council. This is to talk, and this is a kind of a good way to close it. I started with resiliency of infrastructure. This conversation is around a section of road, Sawyer Road, in particular, that we share, Cape Elizabeth and Scarborough, that actually has more frequent occurrences of flooding. And on either side, it's National Rachel Carson Preserve land. And Cape Elizabeth, for his part, has done detailed analysis of the cost upgrade, kind of a conventional engineering approach. My recollection is the low end of the cost is 3.6 and the high end is about 6 million. And staff would like to at least suggest, let's consider possibly discontinuing or abandoning that section of road. We don't suggest that lightly, but we think it's a worthy consideration, at least before we consider investing significantly in this piece of road. We have sent out abutter notices, if you will, to those that kind of are most immediately affected. There's certainly a community component that we can't quite estimate, but I suspect this is just the first of maybe many conversations, and want to engage the two elected bodies in that conversation to see if there's any interest in pursuing that option further. So again, that's March 16th. So we're starting to get filled up, and I'll do my best to keep those calendars full as best we can, but not just for the sake of filling them, but really for having meaningful conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Any questions for Tom?
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I just had next Wednesday's workshop is a continuation of the Downs exemption request. We had in some of our initial workshops requested additional information, and particularly around the concept plan for the downtown area or the town center. That's going to be the focus of the workshop, is for them to give us a much update. Hopefully some visuals as well. Next up is order number 22-008. It's a 7 p.m. public hearing and action on the new request for a food handler's license. First is NIU Waters of Maine Incorporated, doing business as NIU Manufacturing Facility, located at 100 Innovation Way, Unit 5. And the second is John Naylor and Scott Anderson, doing business as Rosemont Market and Bakery, located at 246 US Route 1. And these come to us from the town clerk. And Tony?
The applications have been completed, and is noted in the summary page. The first applicant has also applied for 2 marijuana licenses, and this license will not be issued until those have been before the council.
Okay.
So, and the other one is the Rosemont Bakery, which is
Thank you, Tony.
no sample, sorry.
Are there any members of the public that would like to speak to this public hearing? Seeing none, and none online as well. Okay, I'll close this public hearing. And do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Councilor Caterina?
Welcome to both. I'm not familiar with NIE Waters, but I am familiar with Rosemont, and I think it'll be a great addition. Because they are going, just for the public to know, they are going in at the old fire station, so we're getting that up and running here shortly, I hope, with Harbor View and this, so.
Any other discussion? Sir, would you like to speak to this item?
My name is Felix Finkel. I'm the applicant with the
Come on up.
Waters.
Oh.
I just wanted to.
Sorry, I didn't know you were here.
I just wanted to give you a simple kind of pitch. We make drinks. The drinks contain THC. We don't grow cannabis. We don't process cannabis. We're not looking to sell drinks in a local store in Scarborough. We're just looking to do some manufacturing at 100 Innovation Way, which is a great facility. And I hope we get the chance to do so.
Thank you, sir. And
I didn't go for the obvious crack of asking him to leave a sample. I didn't do it. Left it all alone.
I appreciate that, Paul. You came up with it anyway. Any other discussion? Okay, Tony, would you call the vote on these?
Counselor Sider,
Yes.
Counselor Anderson,
Yes.
Counselor Paul Johnson.
Yes.
Counselor Katarina.
Yes.
Counselor Hamel,
Yes.
Counselor Ken Johnson,
Yes.
and Chairman Clucci.
Yes,
That's unanimous. Thank you.
thank you, and thank you for coming.
Thank you.
There's no old business, and next up is new business, order number 22-009. First reading and waive the second reading to amend the police department budget for fiscal year 21-22 by increasing revenues and expenditures and accepting a Department of Justice grant in the amount of $286,065 to the grant account. And we have our Chief of Police, Chief Holmquist here. I believe you're going to help guide us through this?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for having me tonight. I'm just going to provide an overview of the highlights of this Department of Justice grant that was awarded to us in December of 2021. We were notified of this on December 23rd by the Office of Justice in regards to an award of $286,065 under the Comprehensive Opioid Stimulant and Substance Abuse Site-Based Program Grant. This grant funding will be fully utilized to support the Scarborough Police Department's Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion Program, or LEAD, which was established in November of 2021. The intent of the LEAD program is to provide strategic and proactive ways to divert high-risk individuals to a community-based harm reduction intervention for law violations driven by unmet behavioral health needs. To date, the program has completed 9 successful intakes, helping to link those individuals to programs addressing any identified unmet needs. If approved by council, the program grant award will be utilized to support the following components. The first being hiring a dedicated lead case manager who will conduct intakes and assessments, link participants to resources, and provide follow-up. Currently, the Scarborough Police Department's Social Services Navigator serves as both the program manager and active case manager for participants. The grant award will cover the annual salary and fringe benefits for the case manager for 3 years. The details of that salary is $150,573 for salary and $76,260 for fringe benefits. In addition to this, we are looking for council approval of a second component of this is to provide ongoing training and the costs associated with travel for that training for the program manager and case manager to attend 2 local trainings and 1 located in Washington, D.C. Over the course of the 3-year period. The total cost of that and financial support would be $9,732, again, for training, travel, meals, and gas. And then the final component of this grant award, it'll provide essential funding to support emergency services of participants, including transportation to appointments, temporary housing, clothing and food, telephone services, counseling services for the uninsured individuals, and other unmet miscellaneous expenses for the clients of the LEAD program. These services are pivotal in providing the support for clients to succeed over the course of the 3-year award period. And the total amount of that component of the grant would be $49,500. Of particular note, this grant does not have any matching fund requirement and does not entail any additional commitments following the 3-year award period. So I think this is a great tie-in to our efforts to provide, behavioral health support in addition to our support with the substance use disorder that we've been spearheading since 2015 with Operation Hope. It's a perfect tie-in to that program in support of the proactive work that we're already doing. Open up now to any questions that you may have regarding this award.
Any questions for the chief? Councilor Johnson?
Chief, I think it's a great program. Thank you for bringing that forward. When you're in the council chambers and money starts getting mentioned, years pick up. I'm assuming that salary was an aggregate of the 3 years for that
Yes.
resource, correct? Not per annum?
That's correct.
Great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Questions? Councilor Kennery?
This is actually more a comment. I do want to thank the police department for applying for this grant. I think it's really important that we continue to be role models, so to speak, for other police departments in the state and even outside of the state. Because I'm very proud of the Scarborough Police, and I get a little angry sometimes if you try to lump you guys in with all the other characters or bad actors maybe who are out there. But so thank you for applying for this, and I fully support this.
Thank you.
Are there any members of the public that would like to speak to this agenda item? See, we're going to put, do you have questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
So similar comment to Jean Marie, I think this is great. Since this is only a 3-year grant, is this a relatively new type of grant to support LEAD programs, or is this something that's been around for a while?
I'm not sure how long it's been around, but it's something that our social services navigator, Lauren Dembski Martin, has had her eye on, tying it into that LEAD grant or LEAD program that she initiated in November of 2021. She saw right from the onset that she wasn't going to be able to support both positions given her role. So this is pivotal to helping her, in her role as a social services navigator to kind of delegate responsibilities as needed.
Yeah, and I think this is great, and I think it's probably something that's going to be needed in perpetuity. So I hope we continue to reapply whenever it comes up to make sure we're continuing to provide this service, because I think it's really needed. And I think with the opioid epidemic in Maine, it's just going to continue to be needed. So I really hope we continue to apply and continue to make it a focus to make sure we're looking for these types of grants when we can.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have any questions. I just have comments. Thank you so much for coming and bringing this forward. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, well, I'll give you my discussion. I think it's remarkable, actually, that, this day and age that we're able to fund a position for 3 years out of a grant. And we've been very, I think, proactive and at the forefront of this, in this space. We've had a navigator position for some time. I know that Old Orchard recently added one, I think this year. So I think it's another example of Scarborough Police really kind of helping to pave the way for how things need to happen. So thank you for bringing it forward, and I fully support it.
Thank you.
Would you call the roll, Tony?
Yeah, just if I could, I just want to comment. I very much appreciate past council support and certainly current council's continued support for the social service navigators. We frankly didn't know what we didn't know. We didn't have an appreciation for the sort of need in our community and the resources that she could bring to the equation. It was really eye-opening, frankly. And given that experience and also our involvement with the substance use disorder, we really have a newfound appreciation for the behavioral health piece of this that was at least misunderstood or not well understood by me and I think others. This really is key to starting to fill that need that we've just now fully appreciated. And as an aside, I believe the chief and I will probably be back in front of you in the coming months. We are engaging other partners to talk about what the future of maybe a better statewide system for particularly the substance abuse disorder challenge and the opioid challenge. It's not abating, it's not going away. In fact, it seems to be worsening. And we continue to believe that there's a better model on a bigger stage. But it looks as though we're likely to stay in this capacity for probably another year until that solution is better understood. But we're committed to this and we don't want to leave it hanging. But by the same token, we don't want to be involved forever, at least on the front line.
Thank you, Tom. Would you call the vote?
Counselor Scyther?
Yes.
Counselor Anderson?
Yes.
Counselor Paul Johnson?
Yes.
Counselor Katarina?
Yes.
Counselor Hamel?
Yes.
Counselor Ken Johnson?
Yes.
And Chairman Clucci?
Yes.
That's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Next up is order number 22-010, act on the request to approve the 2022 Town Council goals. I guess I'll introduce this one. This comes out of our workshop that we had, I think, 2 weeks ago now. They're primarily as we went into the workshop with, but there have been some refinements that each counselor has helped to articulate. And are you going to try to bring this up,
I am.
Paul?
Yeah.
I think that's a good idea. I think it's 32.
Bookmarks. Okay.
That's so impressive.
There you go.
Tony, you're the best. Oh, she is. I'm not kidding. She's amazing. All right, there we go. Sorry.
There you go. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and read them. First was to advance the long-term facilities planning, prioritizing a community center pool hub and partnering with the Board of Education on school facility needs. The second was to leverage the townwide community survey to identify actionable improvements with continued public engagement and communication. The third was to take action to improve housing affordability. Fourth was to update and modernize our impact fees. Fifth is a new spin on something. So it's continued fiscal health and sustainability. We've traditionally had the less than 3% mill rate increase target. This is at the end of the process, by the way, but we've added this year less than 5% gross budget increase. And we've also added a less than 15% debt service as a percent of operating budget and an objective to optimize our utilization of tax increment financing districts. And the sixth goal for this year and last goal is to review charter committee recommendations and approve revisions to be included on the November 2022 ballot. With that, is there any member of the public that would like to speak to this agenda item? Okay, so then do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Councilor Hamel?
Yeah, I thought this was a good process, and hopefully people will see a couple of things. One is continuity, some good continuity in terms of what we've done in the past. I've heard very good feedback about the number one goal, the overarching goal of us aligning behind community center pool hub concept. People really like that, a very specific superordinate goal, if you will. And in particular, I know we went back and forth on this, but I was pleased by the inclusion and also how robust the fiscal health and sustainability item was. So I think that was, it's been enhanced. We actually lowered some of the numbers. We tied it into the current dialogue we're having around the TIF changes. So I really support this and look forward to seeing what we can accomplish.
Thank you, Councilor. Any other discussion? Okay.
Just one.
Councilor Anderson.
So the one that's on here, number 3, that I thought was good to keep it kind of somewhat vague,
Right.
is it really does encompass many things. It encompasses the need for more affordable housing, workforce housing, but also how do we address affordability in Scarborough overall, which I know from the survey that we just recently did, affordability was one of the focus areas, I think, that came out as a key priority. So I think that type of stuff is, to me, encapsulated in that goal that we need to, there's many different things we need to address there. And so I'm excited to see that one kind of get a little bit more meat behind it as it moves forward.
Thank you. That's a great point. You know, keeping your tax rate manageable is a way to make it more affordable to stay in your house. That's just one example. But Councilor Johnson.
Yeah, I think I just add with some of the financial goals, I'm really proud of the way we've been trending. I think just from my personal experience, I feel like we haven't had a ton of direction for the last several years with how do we make budget decisions within the context and a framework that we've just discussed ahead of time. And I feel like now we're finally discussing some of those finer points. You know, let's actually wrap our brains around what does our debt mean, you know, and we're actually doing that a lot more, which I think is going to help our conversations be a lot more productive at budget time. And it's a lot easier to understand how much debt we can handle, you know, what is the benefits of the TIF district and all that fun stuff. So I appreciate, I think this was the refinement of this was Councilor Anderson's, I think, last edition. So I do appreciate spelling this out in 4 points because it really is more than just 3%. I'm a lot more comfortable with 3% now that we're concurrently doing these other three things. And I think that was well done articulating that because it was helpful for me. So.
Councilor Sider.
I'll add to, since everyone is commenting, but that these goals represent a lot of consensus building. And so I appreciate that as a council. I know that the night of the workshop, it was pretty free flowing. And I know for some of the counselors, that's a little less comfortable. But, you know, to everyone who kind of boiled this down and John for synthesizing this into something that we can all look at. And I think every one of us, the feedback we gave you was incorporated. And, you know, I think that leads us to a place where we are really all moving in the same direction and we can center ourselves on these goals, you know, throughout the rest of 2022. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to thank you all for participating. You know, now we have a target and that's how you start. So this is the beginning. Would you call the roll, sir?
Counselor Sider,
Yes.
Counselor Anderson.
Yes.
Counselor Paul Johnson,
Yes.
Counselor Katarina,
Yes.
Counselor Hamel,
Yes.
Counselor Ken Johnson,
Yes.
Chairman Clucci.
Yes,
That's unanimous. Thank you.
thank you. Next is order number 22-011. Act on the annual seasonal road posting for weight restrictions if necessary from February 15th, 2022 to May 15th, 2022. Tom, you're gonna,
Yes, sure. This may be a bit of wishful thinking, that by February 15th, we'll be in a position and have a need to actually post the roads, but it's good for the Public Works Director to have this flexibility. We can experience these early spring thaws, and very often he'll impose them and withdraw them depending on weather, even overnight. So this is an annual rite of passage. I guess it's maybe appropriate. We're doing this on Groundhog Day as well. Just occurred to me. And I assure you, the Public Works Department works closely with the development and the contractor community to really accommodate their needs as best we can, but to also protect our infrastructure at the same time. So we look for your approval.
thank you. Any members of the public that would like to speak to this item? Seeing none, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Councilor Katarina.
I know in the years I've been on the council, I look forward to this because it tells me that spring is coming. So that's all I'm gonna say.
Thank you. Any other discussion? I don't know, Phil says it's still, what, 6 weeks away? So we shall see.
Halfway
But didn't
through.
one of them die too before you even?
Yeah.
I heard that this
Yeah.
morning, yeah.
Phil, doesn't Phil always say it's 6 weeks away?
Yeah, I got some angry kids who don't like the groundhog one bit.
Would you call the roll, Tony?
Counselor Sider,
Yes.
Counselor Anderson.
Yes.
Counselor Paul Johnson,
Yes.
Counselor Katarina,
Yes.
Counselor Hamel,
Yes.
Counselor Ken Johnson,
Yes.
and Chairman Clucci.
Yes.
That's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you. Order number 22-012 is act on the request from the Shellfish Commission to approve the allocations of shellfish licenses for 2022. This is brought to us from the Shellfish Conservation Commission, and Councilor Hamel is the liaison. Are you going to help us introduce it?
Yes, thank you. This is an annual task. The Shellfish Conservation Commission, also known as the Shellfish Committee, is the job to set the number of shellfish harvester licenses for the town every year. So this year, the Shellfish Commission has recommended unanimously to maintain the status quo and will neither increase nor decrease the number of licenses. So this is before us as a council to review and approve. Proof of declining harvesting and landings is required in order for us to reduce the number of licenses. And the reasoning behind this is the ordinances and the laws actually protect public in terms of their access to this resource, to, you know, the shellfish resource. So it's specifically designed to try to balance out those interests with those of the folks who are currently the harvesters, you know, who can on occasion try to seek to reduce the number of licenses. So, but that's not the case that we have this year. Okay, so we estimate, however, 4 to 6 licenses may become available through attrition, mainly through retirements and relocations. So they will be reallocated through a lottery in April. And though there have been a number of activities that were disrupted, including survey and conservation work by harvesters and also staff members, these have resumed and we are in compliance with our regulatory requirements with the state. And so that's pretty much it. I don't know if there are any questions.
Any questions for Councilor Hamlin? Any members of the public that would like to speak to this item?
We got 3 minutes.
We're a little loose. If it goes too long, I'll let you know.
Okay. 'Cause the last time I was here, I got cut short.
Okay.
My name's David Green. I live at 135 Beach Ridge Road. I got a couple things to say to you people. Okay. Now, Don Hamill just put out his thing that you're all in compliance. Okay. But you can't, the Shellfish Committee is not living within what the council has directed them to do. Okay. And you keep rubber stamping what comes from them to here. Okay. You're supposed to be out doing surveys and analyzing the surveys and coming up with data to support how many licenses are out there. Believe me, I know. I was a chairman of the Shellfish Committee when a lot of this came to be. And I sat right there 5 years ago with 3 counselors up here, Babine, Chiazzo, and Hayes. And they all just had to have data. You're going back and you're going to do data. We want to see data. Where's the data? It's been 5 years. Mr. Hamill's been on there for 3 of them. When are they going to get some data? The data is sitting in the Marine Resource Office in a file folder that's never seen the light of day since it went in there. So how are you going to get any data to support the numbers you want? And let me tell you something. You can go take back 5 licenses this year. And you're not going to put anybody out of work because you can't support them. You have no data to support those 5 licenses that you have the opportunity. And believe me, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity to get 5 licenses back in 1 year. Okay? But you don't have any data. And I've been yakking about data to a couple of counselors for several weeks now. And there's nobody here from the Shellfish Committee to even talk about it because they don't give a hoot. There's such poor leadership there and so many conflicts of interest on that committee. You're never going to get anything done. Okay? And another conflict of interest. I'm going to bring it up because I believe in it in my heart. And I've sat back for 3 years and watched Mr. Hamill be the council liaison. And he has a conflict of interest there. And you won't recuse yourself. I find that unacceptable behavior for somebody on the council. And it's up to you people to enforce that. Now, if you don't care, then fine. Just tell them to keep on going the way you have been. Now, another issue, and the police chief's right here, and I don't mean to throw rocks at him, but the Marine Resource Office has had 5 officers in the last 6 years. And I was told that it's not the council's problem, probably not. You don't do the hiring and firing, but somebody ought to look into it because there's no stability for the Shellfish Committee. There's very little for the harbor. But you go and do anything you want with your license numbers, okay? But you got a golden opportunity to take 5 back. Now go back and start doing your data and supporting those, giving them back 1 or 2 a year. Because nobody sitting here can tell me that surveys have any direct relation to license numbers. They don't. All right? There's no magic formula. Because you don't realize what a survey is. A survey is a snapshot right now, what's in the ground. And it takes 3 years to raise a clam to maturity. So you got that crystal ball down the road 3 years between green crabs, milky ribbon worms, seagulls, harvesters, and everything else. You have no idea what's going to be there 3 years down the road. And that is wishful thinking that you can set license numbers by data from surveys. And I said that 5 years ago when I was sitting there. Nobody wanted to hear. Y'all had to go out and go get some data. Go get some data. Where's the data? Where is it? Why don't you just take them off that page then and move on? All right. People on that committee got conflicts of interest. They want a license. They don't have one. That's not good for the resource. Okay. Nobody's looking out for the resource when you do things like that. Okay. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
So I'd like to respond in part since Mr. Green has raised the question of a potential conflict of interest among a number of other accusations. This is no secret, but I should disclose that my son, William Hamill, and my brother-in-law, Paul Erickson, are currently commercial license holders and members of the Shellfish Committee. The committee's recommendation in this matter does not involve any financial transaction. The financial transaction or perception of financial transaction alone is typically a reason for bringing up an issue of a conflict of interest. I maintain that there is no conflict of interest. In this case, there is no financial transaction involved other than the aspect of collecting fees from the new Shellfish license holders that might be awarded licenses in April. So, and if there is any further question about this, then there is a process for the council to, to request that I recuse myself. This is not a new issue. It's been raised in the past when we sold the co-op back in 2019. It was raised, and at that time, that council didn't feel it was a matter that required that I recuse myself, or that they asked me to excuse myself from the vote because of any question around it.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I believe the last time we actually voted on this, or at least took a straw poll, was during the community center hub. There was 2 emails that suggested that I would have a conflict of interest to vote against the hub in order to boost my tutoring business. And we had a brief discussion and we took a quick vote. So if you'd allow it, I have no problem. I think we should openly discuss whether we think Councilor Hamill has a conflict of interest, and then move on, put it to bed one way or the other. It's the way we handle it with the hub, and it was easy. So yeah.
I like that suggestion. Thank you for bringing it forward. I would like to add, some of these accusations were brought to my attention before we changed leadership this year. And I still felt that Councilor Hamill was the best person to fill this role. The fact that he has family in town is not unique, but he understands this space. He participates in the meetings. He can represent us and bring back feedback that I don't think that any other one of us would have been able to do to the same degree of competency. So I clearly did not see this as a conflict of interest. I'm not sure if any counselors do or would like to say so, please do.
Yeah.
I'll just echo what you said. And Mr. Green has given me my fair share of hard time over email because I am not competent on this topic. And I think specifically Dawn's the one that is is closest to this. And by closest, I mean understands it. And so there's no, at any time do I think that there's any sort of monetary gain for Don just to simply be a liaison. A liaison role is not super influential. Liaison role is to leverage our specialization and our knowledge to then report back to the rest of us, because we can't all be at every committee every single time. And so I don't think there is. It's precisely, Mr. Green has called me out several times saying, I don't know what I'm talking about with Shellfish. He's not wrong. And I trust Don more than the rest of you, so.
I just want to confirm that Council Hamel has disclosed this in the past, albeit to a different council. So the constitution of this council is slightly different. So just to give you advice in terms of how to handle these, it is the duty to disclose, which has been done this evening. It's then the responsibility of the body to consider the disclosure and make a decision. And should you choose to, just keep in mind, conflicts of interest can really take two forms. One is a direct conflict where there's a financial or pecuniary interest. The other is a perceived conflict, and that can be a little more challenging to discern, if you will. So I just offer that advice to you if you wish to have the body consider the matter formally.
So if we were to consider it formally, would somebody make a motion to either introduce a conflict of interest, or?
It could be formed in any way. The motion could say that I believe there is a conflict and state what it is, or it could be the reverse, that I don't believe there is. And then that matter would be, it's a motion, that matter would be discussed and voted on.
So do I have a motion? Seeing none. We'll move back to, do I have a motion to put order number 22-012, act on the request from the Shellfish Commission to approve allocations of shellfish licenses for 2022 on the table?
So move.
Second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on it? Councilor Johnson?
Just from what I heard, I was wondering if maybe Councilor Hamel could explain the survey concern that maybe has been deferred because of COVID and other things. I mean, what is the normal course of survey? Because I don't know if you guys know, I used to stripe a fish a lot on the river, and I would watch the guys out there with all their GPS stuff. It was actually amazing watching them. And I don't know how many we typically would plant, for lack of a better term, but I know it was at least in the millions, right? Or millions. So can you just go over what it's been lately? Because
Sure.
On the surface, it sounds like a general concern, and I'd like to hear some of the details.
So there's two things. One is conservation activities, which could include seeding and that sort of thing. The other is things like crab kills. We had a problem with green crabs. Those activities were, not being executed consistently. So both of those activities have resumed. And there is a schedule for them, and there's no question there was disruption during COVID. There was no question at all.
Do we know what the health of the population is of the clams?
I don't have statistics right off the top of my head, but the feedback that I get from the harvesters is that there are more clams than they've ever seen in a long period of time. I know it's subjective, but I don't have, Tony, maybe you have landings figures, but right off the top of my head, I can't quote those for you.
But there were 2 surveys done this past spring, and I don't know which ones they were, but they have been, in the last full survey done on all the flats, I believe, was back in 2020.
2020.
And Councilor Johnson, I'll accept responsibility. There has been inconsistency in the Marine Resource Officer position. As was stated from the podium, I think that is a true statement. It's not for lack of effort. I think we finally identified a good, solid person in that role, and I fully expect that we'll get back to kind of to focus on. And conservation is one of those areas that slipped. It requires someone to be the gatekeeper and of the records, and making sure that folks and license holders are actually doing the conservation time that they have to keep their license. So there's certainly responsibility all around. I accept that.
If you may, I'm just going to keep going. I know you're the liaison, so you're not a voting, correct? So
Correct.
right. So this recommendation came, I think you said, unanimous from the committee?
It was unanimous. There was extensive discussion. It's open to the public, so we had.
They reviewed, they fully understand the current population and feel that the existing suggested amount of permits, it will support it.
Right? If they felt there was a threat, then they would be coming forward with another recommendation. That's not what we have.
Okay, thank you.
Don, can you speak a little bit just to the determination of the number of permits? Like, how is that process established for those of us who literally know nothing? So we have a set number of permits that we issue every year, and those are to the same people annually?
The commercial one.
So maybe
Okay.
Tony can help me with this. Tony, maybe if you could make sure your mic is turned on there,
It
but
is, yeah.
she can give
So-
you the details.
The committee sets the licenses for every, so we have 31 commercial. And from that, the state requires us to have so many. So we have to have 4 non-resident commercial. So the state kind of also is in that piece to confirm the numbers. And they also approve the numbers that the committee recommends. But any shellfish license that we have to offer so many to a non-resident, and that's by state law.
Okay.
There are other types of licenses as well. There are a dozen, close to a dozen of them that, in the packet. They include 200 resident recreational licenses, non-resident senior recreational license, day permits. So, I mean, this is something that's sought after. Was like a rock concert, I think, the last time we had permits coming available. And I don't know which category those were, but people got here
Those were
early
the
in the morning,
non-resident
almost slept
recreational.
overnight to queue up to be able to take advantage of that.
We'll have anywhere from 50 to 60 people apply. And now that we know we're going to have some commercial resident, we'll probably have that many, if not more, for those.
I think it's worth noting, if I could, maybe this will help you, though we don't have any hard data. I'm not frankly sure if there is data that could be gathered that would give much more assurance, but nonetheless, for me, these numbers have been fairly static for decades, or at least the time I've been here. And during all that while, the fishery seems to sustain these numbers. It's not as if we're seeing that it's being decimated. So I think should be some comfort that these numbers have been fairly consistent in allocation numbers and type, and the fishery seems to continue to be strong.
Councilor Johnson.
Tony, so you said the last survey was spring of this year,
There were 2 done this past year.
and then so what happens to
Those surveys will go to Augusta for review.
so have they been reviewed by Augusta, or are they
They
in
go up with
process?
a report in the end of this month.
And what is the details of that report typically? Looks good, keep going? Like, how does, is
Pretty
it?
much.
Okay. And then, so the last full one that we received back from Augusta was 2000,
2020.
in what time of the year in 2020?
They varied.
Yeah.
Some were in the spring and some were in summer.
Okay.
And I believe there were some in the fall as well.
So roughly a year and a half ago, we
Mhm.
sent stuff to Augusta,
Yeah, we do an annual report to Augusta at the
Okay.
beginning of every year.
and Augusta came back with no
No issue.
remarks, so to
Correct.
speak. Okay.
Well, and for license allocations, DMR, Department of Marine Resources, must approve the local Shellfish Commission recommendation. So presumably they are more educated than we are. They're basing their opinion in that approval based in part on data provided by us and other resources they have available. So again, there's a check there, and there should be some comfort that a higher level is reviewing and approving.
Even any changes to the ordinance, we have to have DMR approval before we can even bring it to the council.
Councilor Johnson.
Just to follow up, did I hear that there was a survey done just recently? We haven't got the results back. Is that what I heard?
That's correct, because the report doesn't go up until the end of, we have an annual report that we submit to Augusta, which is due by the end of this month, and that covers all of last year. So we're gathering that information, and we'll be sending it to Augusta by the end of this month. And when we should hear something probably end of March, 1st of April. And as soon as, if you'd like, as soon as I do, I'll send it on to the council.
Councilor Johnson.
Tony, what's the nature of the survey? Is it are we sampling a square meter and
I
3
believe
meters deep,
it's-
and
They're counting actually the holes in the, and they have a section of the flats that they
It's a-
count.
They grid off a
And they
section
have
and
yeah, they're
They
doing
have
a
a-
typical biological grid
they have a
off, count the
form.
holes. multiply it by however many foot.
And they have a form that they have to fill out. There's a form that they use.
So just keep an open discussion. So then I'm assuming, based on what I'm hearing from Tony, is that fairly soon we'll have the results of the review by the state of our survey that will say you're either good or not good, right? So is there any concern about tabling this for a month until we get that? And that's the data. Somebody reads the data, says we're good to go. Is it, I just don't know the dynamics about the issuing and everything. Is there a concern about waiting a month?
So what I would say is, let's go back to that, all of the indications we have are positive. If the data came back and suggested that the numbers were way off, they had declined dramatically, then we would have the basis to reduce the number of licenses. So what I would recommend is we proceed with a vote on what we know now. We wait on what we hear from the state, and then we, if there is a decline in the data, it would go back to the committee and they would deliberate again. And then we would see, if there was a desire to reduce the number of licenses. So far, the only person that we've heard in the community, who is suggesting that is Mr. Green. So I would say that based upon, my experience with the committee and what we have, I would recommend we go forward with this as recommended. And there was no suggestion that we hold off, and there's no indication that their decision would be any different. Even if the data said it was a decline or there's some issue with it, there would be an opportunity to change the recommendation, but that doesn't appear to be what we have at this point.
Since I've been here, we've always been approved by Augusta on the numbers.
It was one of the biggest harvest seasons, just in terms of the subjective feedback. This past season, pricing was very high. They couldn't meet demand. And it wasn't, the feeling was it wasn't because of supply. It was just, if anything, probably, go the other way, not enough diggers.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I just assume vote. I think this committee or commission, however you want to refer to it, this is their lifeblood, right? If there was risk there or something, they're going to have a deeper understanding of it than a count that we put together, a survey that we put together. Now that survey might help to, redirect their efforts in the future, but I'm comfortable with the recommendation, honestly, in this case. And you're always going to be getting more data. I wouldn't place any more value on this batch of survey results than I would what's happened previously and what the commission feels is currently appropriate. Councilor Anderson?
Yeah. So coming into tonight, I really was oblivious to a lot of this. And again, generally, I like to trust that our committees have the right expertise to bring forward these types of recommendations, and that the liaison would share if there's any concerns so that we could kind of learn. Seeing how it goes through the state as well, to me also gives me comfort that, this is a process, it's a rigorous process. There's a lot of work that's done. I appreciate Mr. Green coming and sharing his insights to drive this conversation, because it's been really good to learn a lot of this. And so I would agree. I think we should just vote on it and keep it moving. And once the data comes in, and if things change, as Councilor Hamel said, we can always change stuff. So I think we should go with the information we have right now.
I would just ask the liaison if you could, when the report comes in, share it back with the council.
Be happy to do that.
Just to close the loop on that, because it sounds like a genuine concern, but feel comfortable with what the committee brought forward. Okay, thanks.
Well, I learned an awful lot about shellfish today, so in claiming. So thank you, guys. Thank you for coming. Tony, would you call the vote?
Yes. Councilor Seither?
Yes.
Councilor Anderson?
Yes.
Councilor Paul Johnson?
Yes.
Councilor Katarina?
Yes.
Councilor Hamel?
Yes.
Councilor Ken Johnson?
Yes.
And Chairman Tucci?
Yes.
That's unanimous. Thank you.
The next is order number 22-013, act on the request to reappoint the town clerk as Register of Voters pursuant to Title 21, MRSA 101.2. This comes to us from the town clerk.
This has to be done, actually it should have been done in January. It's a formal procedure for this, that the state requires us to do, and I would accept the appointment.
Thank you. Any members of the public would like to speak to this? Thank you. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Counselor Johnson.
Yeah, are there any references for the applicant?
Well played, Johnson, well played.
She's gonna say you can have it. I really don't want it.
She may be busy conducting surveys, of Shellfish instead, counting votes.
Okay. Counselor Katarina.
Yeah, I just want, to make note of the fact that the town clerk, Tony, does an awesome job with elections. Prior to being on the council, I was the deputy warden, and I don't know, I did all sorts of different things with elections, so I've worked with her. So, I mean, and I will tell you that other clerks will call Tony when they've got questions about things that are going on with elections or whatnot. So I'm pleased to reappoint her, even though she may be like, oh, again? No.
Counselor Johnson.
Tony, do you ever get bored of us laying it on this thick? Because if you like it, is it enough? Okay, you'd rather get out earlier. I have no comment.
Well, what would November be without having to stay up till 2 o'clock in the morning counting ballots? You'll probably have one in your future this year.
Oh, sure.
So thank you for everything that you do,
Oh, you're welcome.
including, would you call the vote?
Counselor Seither?
Yes.
Counselor Anderson?
Yes.
Counselor Paul Johnson?
Yes.
Counselor Katarina?
Yes.
Counselor Hamel?
Yes.
And Counselor Ken Johnson?
Yes.
Chairman Clutzy?
Yes.
That's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any standing or special committee or liaison reports? Counselor Johnson.
I'll make mine super quick. First and foremost, for the public's knowledge, we did take our bus tour last week at the Downs site. We met here at Town Hall, got on a bus, met in the conference room in their commercial space, right on their main street there. And it lasted about 2 hours. I would say about an hour and a half of that was actually more of a presentation for us to further understand the direction they're headed for their revision that they'll give us February 9th. So they didn't give us all of the details, so to speak, because they're still working, I think, pretty hard to finalize some things. But I think some takeaways for us is we had a better idea of what the orientation of the downtown would be, better idea of what the general direction of the green space would be, a community center, where types of buildings may be. I think they all reserve the right to tweak those, but it was at least informative enough for us to get spatial awareness. It was also good to be able to be on the bus and to physically be sitting in what would be a green space or what would be the town square, and to be able to look to the left and say that could be the community center. So that was the nature of that. So the public knows we did that last week. Quickly, as the Downs liaison, I'm meeting with them at 8:50 tomorrow morning. I'm meeting with them via Zoom. Counselor Katarina's turn to join me. As a reminder, we're cycling out all the counselors, and a new counselor's meeting with me every time I meet with them. John Anderson, you will be next. The topic for tomorrow, I have about 20 minutes before class, so the topic will be very brief. I think he'll probably just finalize. We always like to talk about, does it make sense to repeat this? Do you think people are still not understanding this? Is it a waste of time to go over the cost to serve analysis we've seen 3 times? That's the nature of this conversation, will be to set up with, and I believe it'll just be me, Dan Bacon, Jean Marie, and Tom Hall. I don't know if any of the other members will be there, but that's who will be there. Lastly, Finance Committee. Finance Committee's been doing a lot of work lately surrounding the downtown TIF district. We've been trying, particularly a big push to understand the mechanism of sheltering, the tax shelter benefit of the TIF district. We have made a recommendation, and we'll roll that out in 2 weeks' time at a workshop. The timeline for that will be extended a little bit. We're going to finish that up in March due to mostly Don Hamill's feedback saying, hey, can we spread it out a little bit? So we're spreading out a little bit. And I think the name of the game for all of this has been education. We've just been trying to relentlessly educate ourselves. I think every counselor has been really good submitting questions, talking to me, clarifying questions. And I think overall it's been really positive. So those are my two updates.
Thank you, sir. Counselor Katarina.
Yeah, as you can imagine, the Maine Municipal Legislative Policy Committee, we've been going through bills. We spent a whole day on Zoom going through legislation. You know, it's like, I had to leave early though, because we had an ordinance committee meeting. Basically, there's a lot of marijuana things coming up that they're going to be dealing with. Chris Chiazzo happens to be the House chair on that committee. So if as I told Mr. Johnson, you know, if you've got any real direct questions, call Chris, because he's obviously the guy who's dealing with that. We had things about the clerks being relieved of doing those ethics filings and get them to the Maine Municipal, the Maine Ethics Commission. I have to say, Tony, I missed the final vote. I'm not sure where MMA came down on it, but I told them I really supported taking that off our plate. Because in the state, any town, is it 15,000 or over population, the town clerks do all of the finance reporting and whatever. And it gets a little dicey because you're putting the clerks, when there are issues with finance reporting, the clerks have to deal with it. And it may be a counselor, for example, or someone that they have to work with closely. So that's part of what we want to take care of. And then there was widespread support for making it an increased felony to interfere with election workers. Regretfully, in this day and age, you know, people don't have any manners anymore or any sense of propriety. So we haven't had many issues in the state, but we want to be proactive on that to make sure that people who are volunteering their time and those who aren't, but are here till 2 in the morning or whatever, aren't being harassed, bothered, or whatever by people from the public or, you know, interfering with the election process. So that's been interesting. Supposedly this is the second part of the session because it's 2-year sessions. So this is supposed to be emergencies only. Yeah, right. So it's almost as many bills as they have in the first session. They're supposed to be done though by the 3rd week in April, I think, is when statutory adjournment is, but we'll see if they do that. Also, I'm just going to put a plug in for Project Grace Fuel Assistance. I've fallen down on the job with this. Again, I'm challenging all of you as counselors to go online and make a donation to the fuel assistance program. It's critical this year in particular. I'm sure all of you, either, you know, your electric bills have gone up. Even though I have solar and my bill for, was it last month or this month? Because there's a couple months where I use up all my banked solar. It's $300. And I'm like, wow, what are people doing? And then fuel, as a real estate broker, we do proration of fuel, and you know, it's $3 whatever it is a gallon. So I worry about people in town, and I talked to Steffi Cox, and there are a number of people who really need help with this. So, you know, I encourage everyone out there watching to go online to Project Grace, make a donation, even if it's $10, $5. I don't, you know, just something. And you can also get those bags in the clerk's office to fill with your empties. Those go a long way. Jeff and I, that's what we do all year long. And I forget how many, it's $100 maybe in a year, if not more. So that's it. And then they are doing their Saturday, February 19th. Any town councilors, I'm going to be there helping them, working with that. It will be a great little, you know, activity. People will drive through, get chowder or whatever they can order online, and just support the community. So you got it right there.
Just did it while you were talking.
Thank you. I
I
appreciate
wasn't
it.
listening to anything you were saying.
That's okay, but you were donating. That's good. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Jim. Counselor Johnson.
Yeah, the planning board, I recommend that you guys all watch the planning board. It's actually a good one. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't make it to the end because it was just a very long day and they're a very long meeting. But a couple of points out here were very interesting. this was Monday night, they just approved the beacon. And how long ago? It just felt like
Yeah.
6 months ago we were dealing with that. So they just approved the beacon Monday night. IDEX breezed right through the process. Matter of fact, I've never seen the planning board rave about any client like they did. They said these guys were solid. Everything was just laid out nicely and everything. So they approved the first wave is like 114,000 square foot building. And then the second wave it will add, it'll be like 218 total on that, but that's more to come on that. An interesting part was, I don't know if any of you were involved with I did a site walk, I think, with a planning board last year. It might have even been a year before. It was pretty cool. We had this 65-inch television on the back of a pickup truck with a GPS, and we were walking through the fields, and they were showing us the downs, because at that time, everything off the left, it wasn't built yet. You know, remember when we went, saw that built, none of that was there, but you could see it because everything was using Google Maps, everything was superimposed. But we walked down the way of where the Haggis Parkway is going to be tied to Center Street. Okay. And I don't know if you were there or not, I can't remember.
No.
But there's a stream down there. Is it Willowdale Stream? Is that what
It
it's
is,
called?
yep.
Willowdale Stream. So that's a big challenge to get over there. They had to do a lot with DEP. Well, they've got the approvals. And this July, they're going to tap off Haggis into Center Street and stub when they come over that brook and lay all the infrastructure in down. So, I mean, that's a really big start. That is tying it in. But you got to watch it because it was mentioned a couple times too, that they're going to stub it. I'm sure there's more reasons for what was stated, but they're waiting for the town council decision on the downtown. Because, you know, they're not going to be at the town center. They're going to stub it over there, which is still, it's probably 500-600 feet away. So very interesting meeting, very productive. And all I did was read about Costco in the paper, and I talked to the planning and they said, well, that was a little slanted. It was,
You think?
That's it.
Counselor Johnson.
Can I ask you a quick question? Because did I hear that with my meetings with Dan Bacon, they also can only get over that river. They have like a 3-month window every year, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
So like they have to do it now or wait till next. Is that right, Tom? Is that?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And though that is at the back end of their TMP responsibility, must be done by 2026. They are not desperate. They really want to land the grocery store, and that will require connection. So I think they're preparing for that. And you're exactly right. They got permitted and they'd like to build a section to get across the river so they can make that final connection when the grocery store lands.
They got two big lots on the entry side to Vegas, one on the left, one on the right. Can't remember what size. You know, they work in something they didn't really allude to what it was, but you can tell, you know, they have things moving along. But
Yeah,
that's pretty
you're exactly right.
exciting,
And starting from the Parkway in
Right.
and crossing allows them some development opportunity on that land
Yeah.
that isn't accessible at this point.
And just to clarify, when you reference the grocery store, you're not referencing Costco.
No, this is
No.
a separate one closer to the town center.
And just to clarify that, Costco is nowhere near the town center or where they're proposing the town center. It's at the
Correct.
very outside of the development, right? Counselor Anderson.
Yeah, so just quickly to update, we had the transportation committee meeting last week. And the thing that I thought was really great to see, because the long range planning committee representative came and they talked about how we're starting to get more into action planning. And so it was the first conversation to really take apart Vision 5, which is really around traffic and transportation, to start to think about more specific actions that the committee can work on to help address the traffic concerns like we saw in the survey. So I think that's really cool. I don't know if you guys have seen them come yet to your other committees to share some things that they might be aligned to, but it's really great to see the investment that was made in the comp plan and in the survey starting to come together a little bit in a very actionable way. So I just think more work will come out of that group, hopefully around traffic and transportation, that we can hopefully share more with the public as that work advances.
Thank you. Counselor Hamel.
Thank you. I had two quick updates. The Appointments and Negotiations Committee will meet on Monday at 5:30. It's going to be a short agenda with a single action item. I think there's really only one or two vacancies. But we're also going to have a discussion item on the status of pending committee revisions from Community Services and Rec Advisory and also Conservation Commission at Pest Management. So we were moving very quickly during our year-end staffing activity and realized that these these two particular groups are going to require a little more focus, particularly Conservation Commission, because they have regulatory back, underpinning, their authority flows from that. So some of the things they're proposing, we're not sure really would fit with the regulatory intent. So we'll do that also in ordinance. Coastal Waters and Harbor Committee and Shellfish Commission will meet on Tuesday at 5:30 and 6:30 PM respectively. They're working on revisions to the ordinances which govern their work. So they're updating both those ordinances. And we'll have ample time to unpack our conversation this evening about the number of license recommendations for this year. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other reports? Okay. I guess just from a leadership perspective, there has been a little bit of activity on the Enterprise Business Park. I don't know if you've noticed, there's a sign out front that's been there for probably a decade. It says it's pre-approved for 330 units. We're going to have, and I don't know any details, but we're going to have an introduction with them at our next leadership meeting. And we'll report out anything that comes out of that. Are there any council member comments? Seeing none. Next order is order number 22-014, act on the request for an executive session pursuant to Title I MRSA 405/6A regarding a personnel matter relating to the town manager's employment agreement. And just to let everybody know, we will be adjourning directly from executive session, so there's no need to stay. We'll record the time of adjournment at that time. And do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Any discussion?
Counselor Seider,
Yes.
Counselor Anderson.
Yes.
Counselor Paul Johnson.
Yes.
Counselor Katarina.
Yes.
Counselor Hamel,
Yes.
Counselor Ken Johnson,
Yes.
and Chairman Clucci.
Yes.
That's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming.
Paul, can you